Hey friends, Catherine here from Research Rockstar. Thanks for joining me here today. And today I've got a really important topic, and I'm going to start with a question for you to get us started. Are your customers bored? Now, I don't mean to be insulting, but let's have an honest conversation. It's happened to all of us at some point or another. You're at the end of a project, you're delivering a report, you're in some meetings or in a presentation, and you start to think, is this just a group of people who are sort of stoic? They're just not very, verbal about their excitement for the research, or are these people actually bored? And the brutal reality is that sometimes, I know this is hard to hear, but sometimes market research results can be boring. Unfortunately, it's our job to really make sure people are engaged. And if they're bored, then the chances of them actually using your research or even just having a positive feeling about market research is really a problem, right? So we want them to be excited about market research. We want them to be really engaged. So how do you know if somebody's really bored or if they're just kind of stoic by nature? Well, here's 4 good clues that will help you identify, yes, these are people who are bored and I need to do something about it. If during a presentation they ask 0 questions, that is a huge red flag. I always know that when I'm presenting that the more questions I get, the better. Don't let it make you sweat. If they're asking questions, that means they're paying attention enough to have questions. People who don't think aren't asking questions. I can tell you this from my experience as well as a college professor. When I'm teaching my graduate students something and I'm not getting any questions, I know that they're just not following along. Either I've gone over things too quickly and they haven't been able to keep up enough to have questions, or I bored them and they don't have any questions. So if I'm getting no questions, whether it's with a group of graduate students or a group of market research clients, it's a huge red flag. How about this one? You've delivered some research results and you've offered a one-on-one meeting to a key client to discuss the results, and they decline. They say, not really interested. Thanks anyway, I'm all set. That, again, is a huge red flag. If they are not interested enough to actually spend some time to discuss the results and how they're going to use it, that is a big red flag that the research was boring for them. They don't even want to spend any more time thinking about it. So that's a challenge. If they're really interested, they're going to be happy for that one-on-one. Even the most experienced market research clients will want to talk to the research lead about how they can use the results, or to request additional analysis, or to go over specific visual displays, or request any follow-ups. If they don't want that one-on-one, that's a problem for me. How about this one? You've delivered the report, it's a week later, and they haven't sent you any feedback. Maybe you got the dreaded 3-word email. Thanks a lot. Yikes. If that's the only response that you're getting after you send in a research report, again, red flag. They're bored. They're not engaged. They don't think it's that interesting. So, again, now I know my client is bored and I need to do something about it. Or this one. They just come right out and they tell you, thanks for the work, but it really didn't teach me anything new. Anybody who's been in market research for more than a year or 2 has had this experience. And the truth is that that's because sometimes we do projects that are actually meant to confirm things we already know, or to measure things we already know, not to actually discover something new. So this one's a great case where that may have actually been the plan all along. And if they're bored with that outcome, then maybe that means I didn't do a good job of setting that expectation from the start to say, look, this project was designed to measure something that we already know exists. We already know that our customers have behavior X. The whole purpose of this project is to measure exactly how wide that exists in the market, how broadly that exists in the marketplace. So we already knew that most of our customers use our products in the kitchen, but we wanted to find out exactly what that percent is. Oh, we learned that it was 83%. Awesome. So, but that should be good, right? It may not be the most exciting research in the world, but it should still be engaging to them if that's what the purpose was. So again, these are 4 good clues you can use to decide, are my clients just being a little bit stoic? Maybe they're just not the kinds of folks who are very effusive in their compliments or their feedback, or are they actually bored? An important part of managing clients is actually managing them consciously. And in fact, one of the things that we do teach at Research Rockstars, we have actually a 2-day class on client management. And in that class, one of the things we do talk about is that client management is a skill. There are certain things that you can do as a market researcher to proactively manage your clients. And the brutal reality is that very often in market research, this is not something that's emphasized. When you're assigned a new project, you're assigned to go do a market segmentation study for brand X, or maybe you work on an insights team and you've just been teamed up to do a project for your product development team on identifying new feature requirements for product Y. Very often when you get those assignments, unfortunately in our field, nobody says, by the way, not only is your responsibility meeting these research objectives and this quota requirement or these screening criteria and these types of deliverables, but they don't often also say, and part of your job is client management. It's just sort of assumed, but people really need to call this out because client management is something that has to be done as actively as designing a great questionnaire. It has to be done as actively as planning an awesome deliverable. It has to be done as carefully as what the process at the start of a project where you're looking at your client's objectives and trying to figure out what types of methods and data sources are going to best meet their needs. So client management is actually something that takes time. So let me share with you a couple of key lessons I always like to teach people about client management because it will help you to avoid that boredom risk issue that we've been talking about. First of all, when you're working on a new project and you're working with clients, and for some of you, your clients are internal. For some, they're external. Either way, one of the first things that you can do to really get your handle on what your client management workload is going to be is to think about the client. And I find that in general, clients, market research clients, people who are using customer insights information, typically fall into one of 6 categories. They're either a research enthusiast. I love working with these people. They are already educated, they've bought into the research, they want to be involved. Then you also have the busy executive. Now, the busy executive is somebody who may care about research, they're interested in it, but they're really busy. And they're going to let you know, look, I'm going to be involved here and there, but I've got 10 other more urgent things on my plate. That's okay. Then you've got the person who's the extreme delegator. I find this kind of client really difficult. This is the client who's an executive, and you're working with this executive, and she says to you, I'm delegating this to my team. I'm delegating this to these 3 people who work for me, and they'll make all the decisions, and I'll come back at the end of the project to see your beautiful results. The problem with the extreme delegator is that oftentimes when they do come back in, they're not happy with the decisions that have been made. They may have delegated it to people who didn't make the decisions that they would have liked if they had been making it themselves. So now they're disengaged because, frankly, they weren't involved with the process. That kind of person is really hard to manage, so you definitely want to identify them right away. The good news is you can tell that person right away because they are going to start delegating from day one, and they're going to really withdraw from the project. So you're going to know that kind of client pretty easily. At the opposite, you also have the micromanager, the business decision maker, the business executive who's going to micromanage every step of the way. They want to write the questionnaire. They're going to have very specific requirements in your discussion guide if you're doing, say, focus groups or in-depth interviews. If you're doing a social media analysis project, they're going to have some very specific things that they want done to screen out certain types of comments. And some of those things may be great, right? They're a subject matter expert, and some of their guidance may be useful. However, what happens, unfortunately, with the micromanager is that the micromanager can micromanage your project to the point where it's not going to deliver interesting data. So because they're not the research expert, unfortunately, I've seen many cases where somebody's a micromanager. First of all, it's exhausting for you as the market researcher to work with this person. But secondly, they actually have a tendency to kind of shoot themselves in their own foot. And so at the end of the project, they're getting results that aren't great. I've been there. I've seen it happen. The 5th type of personality that you're going to run into that you have to really manage proactively, especially to keep them from getting bored, is the research skeptic. There are people who unfortunately have had bad past experiences with market research, and so they're coming into your project already cynical. They're ready to say things or do things that show that they've already discredited the value of the research in their own mind. So keeping that person engaged is really, really challenging. It can be done because very often what I have found is that those people really are cynical because they did have a bad past experience. So find out what that past experience was. Talk to them about it. Don't be shy about it. I've had experiences where I've met with people like this one-on-one and discovered that the last time they did a project, it was a huge, big budget project, and frankly, the researcher did screw up. There were some poor screening, or there was an issue with the methodology, or there was an issue with how the data was cleaned or presented. That happens. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. So then if I can find out what happened and assure that person, I know how to deal with those situations, I know how to mitigate those risks, I have a chance of turning them around. And I've actually had clients who were new clients to me when I first worked with them who were research skeptics, but by the time I had done a project with them, had actually become some of my best clients. So these people can be saved. The sixth type of person who can be difficult to manage and you need to identify is the, quote, purchasing agent. They may literally be a purchasing agent, or they may just be acting like they're a purchasing agent. This is the person who doesn't really care about the content from day one. They're just there to execute a contract, get a purchase order, make sure that status memos are coming in, but they're not really engaged with the content. This kind of person is really hard to manage. So with all 6 of these types of clients, the things that you're going to do, the tactics you're going to employ to make sure they are engaged and they won't be bored at the end of the project will vary. But start by really thinking, am I working with somebody who's a research enthusiast, the busy executive, an extreme delegator, a micromanager, a research skeptic, or a purchasing agent? Because how you're going to engage with those people will vary. And there are a lot of different tactics that we use in market research client management to make sure that we're doing a good job. And perhaps the most important thing, frankly, is about setting and managing expectations. If we do a good job of setting and managing expectations about what they're going to learn, what we're discovering, what we're planning to measure, what we're planning to be able to conclude from this research, if we do a good job of setting and managing those expectations, they're going to be more likely to be engaged throughout the project, including at the end. So setting and managing expectations is really important. But again, how you do that may vary depending on the type of client you're dealing with. Part of this also has to do with consistent and accurate communications. Don't fall into a black hole in the middle of your project. It's really important to be consistent and accurate in all of your communications. Even if you're feeling like you're not getting a lot of feedback in the middle of a project, keep it going. Because even if you're not getting a lot of direct feedback, your consistency, your accuracy in your communications is actually scoring sort of credibility points, if you will, throughout that project, so that when you are at the end, the client's feeling good about you and is feeling good about the professionalism of what's been done. Another great way to avoid boredom is to learn to speak your client's language. If you're working with a client who has no market research background, make sure that when you're talking to them that you are speaking business language. Use common jargon. Don't get wrapped up in things that sound like market research speak. Certainly avoid things that sound like statistics, right? So anything you can do to bring numbers to life through metaphor or examples, anything you can do to show them specifically what this research means for them is going to be helpful. Think about what their job is. What do they need to be successful? What's the kind of language? What are the kind of conversations they're having on a day-to-day basis? Is this a marketing executive who cares a lot about optimizing conversions? Is this a sales executive who cares a lot about lead generation? Think about who the client is and what kind of language they use. Speaking their language is going to help you keep them engaged. There are other tactics that we use to manage clients, but those are a few of them. Other things have to do with client education. Sometimes you do need to educate your client a little bit. Another thing can be about anticipating any concerns and having prepared any preemptive strikes. For example, if you know there's going to be some data coming out that might appear contradictory at the surface, don't let them observe that. You tell them. Well, as you saw in the study, people are both price sensitive yet self-report that they really care and have a lot of loyalty to these high-end status brands. Well, the client's going to say, well, that's a contradiction. How can they say they're price sensitive yet they like high-end status related brands? Don't let them observe that. You should be pointing out that apparent contradiction ahead of time. Let them know, be preemptive, and then point out either your explanation for that. State it as a reality. If it's just a brutal reality that there's a contradiction here, just observe that. And if there's something else that can be done, let them know. Hey, we discovered something that appears to be a contradiction. We think that this might warrant some further investigation. Here's what we recommend. So again, there are a lot of different tactics that you can use to proactively manage clients. As a researcher, I know it can be hard because you're really managing a project and you've got a lot of research tasks to do, but managing the client really is an important part, and it will help to avoid that risk that at the end of the project, they'll be bored. For those of you who are more interested in this topic and want to learn more, we do offer client management as a course here at Research Rockstar. It's a class that meets twice, so it's a 2-week class, once a week for 2 hours each time, and it's got some really great homework assignments so that you get to practice what we actually talk about in the class. And so if you want to check it out, visit training.researchrockstar.com to get the next dates. This course is also available in our on-demand format. One last thing before I go today. I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary of doing these conversations. These conversations are released on both YouTube and on iTunes as a podcast. I'm trying to decide if I should continue. And so my criteria for making that decision will be whether or not I get enough new subscribers to warrant continuing. So my goal is to get 50 new subscribers over the next 2 weeks. If I get 50 new subscribers, I'm going to continue for another 6 months. And so how do you subscribe? Well, if you're on YouTube, you'll see that at the bottom right corner of the video, there's a click now subscribe button that appears from time to time. So you can just click that in order to subscribe. And if you have colleagues who might enjoy this series, if you could forward this to them and ask them to subscribe, that would be something I would be most grateful for. If you're listening on iTunes, you can subscribe. And the other thing about iTunes is if you look for the Research Rockstar Conversations for Research Rockstars on iTunes, if you click the icon, you'll also see something that says ratings and reviews. iTunes has a very high threshold for reviews. That is, we have a number of reviews, but iTunes isn't showing them yet because we haven't gotten enough. You have to actually have a really large number of them before they actually show them. So please subscribe on iTunes, and if you could just take 30 seconds to go over and click on ratings and reviews for Conversations for Research Rockstars and leave a review. That'll help us get to the point where we're getting enough reviews where it will actually start showing our reviews. That's important because if somebody goes into iTunes right now and searches for market research, we're not coming up in the first matches because we don't have enough reviews yet. So reviews are really important. And again, if I see that I'm getting 50 more subscribers on iTunes, then that's going to give me confidence to continue. So that's my goal. I'm looking for 50 more subscribers on YouTube and 50 more subscribers on iTunes. And any help getting there would be most appreciated. Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope you have a great week.